All right, well, I'm going to try to jump into my solve pretty quick here, but just a little commentary I have on the poem and the solve and just kind of the way it was managed. Um, so I was actually pretty happy with the solution they came up with. It actually mirrored a lot of what I did on my own for my solves, and so naturally, I'd like to see that I was at least thinking conceptually along the right lines in terms of how I went about trying to figure it out. What I didn't love, and what I hated, is some of the things they put in the poem, and specifically their insistence on the theme of time being prevalent throughout the poem. The first line in the poem, begin your search where time was transcendent, and their solution to that was, this is the place monument on Ensign Peak and Heritage Park, being where time was transcendent. And while certainly that was a huge event in the history of Utah, it was a very important thing that happened. In no way, shape, or form was that a place where time, as a concept, that time was transcendent. I don't understand that at all, and they didn't explain it in their solve video. And I still think to this day they can't explain why that's where time specifically was transcendent, and that would be okay. I think if they want to use that to fit the I guess the way the poem rolls off the tongue, that's fine. But then don't go double down and say that the theme of the poem is time, because from what I can gather, time was only very peripherally involved in this poem. It was basically not more than an hour. You'll know by its crest that was supposed to represent the number 60 for the height of the this is the place monument, the duration of time it would take to hike to the final location, and 60 feet off the trail. And they gave us 60 feet off the trail from the beginning anyway. So I'm not really sure what they thought they were accomplishing by insisting that the overall theme of the poem was time, when the first clue doesn't even fit that theme. Um, so anyway, that's just my little rant. But I'll get into my solve now. So, because I thought the theme of the poem was time, I thought I was looking for a place that actually fits that clue. Not to be too salty about it, but I am a little bit. So for me, that was the Centennial Carillon Tower at BYU. And that's located right here on the north end of campus. And the reason I thought this is where time was transcendent is because A, it's a structure that measures time. If you've never seen the Carillon Tower, this is it right here. It has bells on the top, and just like a clock tower, it plays a chime or a series of a tune to "Come, Come, Ye Saints" at the top of every hour. And so I built my entire solve around this location because not only is it a structure that measures time, but it's the Centennial Carillon Tower. In other words, BYU built this in 1975 to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the university. In other words, it's a structure that measures time that was built to look back in time. It was built to commemorate something that happened in the past. And so it's literally where time was transcendent. Okay? Another interesting thing that will become relevant in the fourth line of the poem, and that is this little plaque at the base of the Centennial Carillon Tower, and that is a Y made into a tree. Right, we're looking for a tree that stands without bark, and here we are at the place where time was transcendent, and we have a tree right here in front of our face, which is just nuts. If you figured that first part out and then you find that tree, you're like, holy crap. Now, the next line of the poem is, crack open the books, they're interdependent. So, I mean, we're at a university, right? That's a pretty good place to crack open the books, if you ask me. Lift up your eyes and look for the mark. So, lift up your eyes, that sort of has a religious connotation to it. And so, not only are we at a university where we're cracking open the books, but we lift up our eyes, we're on a religious campus, and look for the mark. And as you can see in this photo right here, from the Carillon Tower, you look up and there's the Y, there's your mark, right? And the Y is arguably the most famous mark on the mountain in the state of Utah. I mean, there's no other even the U, which maybe Utah fans would argue that's a more important mark, but you can't really see the U from everywhere. The U's kind of hidden in its own little corner of Salt Lake City. The Y, you can see it from everywhere. I mean, frick, the Y, and the Y is the biggest. It's on the most imposing mountain. I mean, I'm sorry, but when it comes to which which letter on the mountain is the letter on the mountain, it's clearly the Y in the state of Utah, and we can have an argument about that aside from this video. But anyway, you lift up your eyes and look for the mark. Hike to the tree that stands without bark. Well, we just saw from that plaque that there's a Y made into a tree, so that's a pretty damn good case to just hike to the Y on the mountain, right? But I actually took it a little further than that. So hike to the tree that stands without bark. On BYU campus, there is something called the Tree of Wisdom. I'm going to show it to you here. So this was a sculpture built also in 1975 and also to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of BYU. So it has an inherent root and connection to the Carillon Tower. They were both built as gifts to the campus as a commemoration, as a celebration of the 100-year anniversary of BYU. Okay, so this is a great fit for the tree that stands without bark. Also, it looks like a Y. If you look at this in this picture, and a lot of people have commented on this throughout the years, they call this the Y tree because it looks just like a Y. And so that little plaque at the base of the Carillon Tower with a Y made into a tree fits quite nicely here. So let's just go ahead and draw a line from the Carillon Tower right here. I'm going to try to make this as precise as possible because precision is important. We will measure distance, and the Tree of Wisdom is located down here on the southwest end of campus, as you can see. As we zoom in here and get some resolution, there you can see it right there. So let's just draw a line right here to the Tree of Wisdom. All right. And I was under the belief that we're building a clock here because the theme is time, right? Like I'm starting at a bell tower that measures time. Why would I not be building a clock? The theme of the poem is frickin' time. At least they told us, right? So we draw our line from the tower, and now I believe we are looking for the subsequent clues along this line. So the next line in the poem is past the grain tower that looks out to the west. And one of the most popular theories for this early on was the Knight grain elevator in Eureka, Utah, that looks out to the west. It's kind of in the southwest central part of the state, right where the edge of the boundary was in the original boundaries they created. And we know that that Knight grain elevator was made by Jesse Knight. Jesse Knight was a huge contributor to BYU in its early days. And BYU named a building after him. It's the Jesse Knight building. And as we see, our line goes right past the grain tower that looks out to the west, or the Jesse Knight building. And that was cool enough to me, but I wanted to take it a step further. So you zoom in here, right where that's zooming in on the sidewalk there, okay? So I'm not going to fudge with this at all. So we're going to have to get rid of our line here for a second, but where that star is exactly where the line intersects the sidewalk. And I'm going to click right there on our street view. And let's see where the street view takes us when we... And it doesn't like that. Let's see. Let's do it again here. Okay, here's our street view from where we clicked. Okay, let's look. Wow, we are right in front of the crest. So in other words, past the grain tower that looks out to the west, not more than an hour. It's our hour hand. You'll know by its crest. Well, here's our crest, and it even has the BYU crest on there, but I think the crest is more just referring to the sign itself. Now you got to realize this is a 3 or 4 foot sign. And we just drew a line from a perfect place for where time was transcendent. That line went right to the tree that stands without bark. These are both small objects, right? And that line literally went right through this little concrete sign that represents the Jesse Knight building. So we'll know by its crest what we just found out by its crest, right? So let's go back and reform our line so we can move on to the next clue. So, and bear with me as I have to sit here and mess with these lines. This isn't the ideal way to do this, to do this live while I'm talking about it. See, now it's giving me a problem. Okay, so I had some technical difficulties with Google Maps, but I'm drawing the line again from the Carillon Tower. to our tree of wisdom. Okay. And now we are going to look down our map to not wander with thirst. Okay. So as I thought about this clue, I was looking for water, right? And there was a couple, fountains on campus that I thought fit nicely. But then I realized if I followed that line across the midpoint of the Carillon Tower, like kind of like the same way a clock hand will overlap past the midpoint and there's kind of that overhang portion of the hour hand. I thought the same thing might be occurring here. And I noticed there's a water tank right up here by the MTC. And I noticed as I zoomed into that water tank, there is an American flag on the top. Someone went up there and painted that up there. So we're looking down on our map. We're seeing something that we wouldn't see from the ground. That's why we're looking down on our map. And then it says, remember two less than on top of the first. So on top of our carillon tower, a carillon is an instrument made out of bells, right? And it usually has a bunch of bells. So the BYU Centennial Carillon Tower has 52 bells to represent the 52 weeks of a year. And how many stars are on American flags, right? 50. So look down on your map, not to wander with thirst. We have a water tank. Remember two less than on top of the first. Well, 52 minus 50 is 2. So let's draw our line through through the water tank here, okay? And as we see, as we zoom back out and look at the entire line here from the beginning to the end, that line is a perfect line. So the same line that went from the Carillon Tower through the Jesse Knight crest, through the Tree of Wisdom, goes right through this water tank up here, okay? So you have this perfect line. This is our hour hand, right? And we might as well go draw our minute hand too. What the minute hand was the line from the Carillon Tower through the Y, and that's your mark, so to speak. Okay, so let's do a line from the Carillon Tower, and let's put it through the Y, and we'll extend it beyond the Y because that's how we're going to use it eventually. So right through the Y, we have our minute hand. So we have a minute hand here. We have our hour hand here going to the water tank. And then I thought about the Provo Temple because one day I was on a hike and I looked at the Provo Temple and I was like, maybe that has to come into play somehow, but I wasn't sure quite how. But here we have our hour hand pointing right at the Provo Temple, right? And in one of the emails, Dave said he mentioned the summer solstice, and that stuck with me. It's like, the theme of this poem is time, and he's talking about the summer solstice. And I'm sitting here building a clock. Maybe somehow a sundial might come into play here because how do you measure time with the sun but with a sundial, right? And so I started thinking about like how in the world could I bring a sundial into play here? And I started looking up like different kinds of sundials. And I actually found out BYU campus has a sundial on it, which we'll actually bring that into the solve later. Um, but I started looking up different types of sundials, and one of the types of sundials is an equatorial sundial. It's this sundial with basically this pole sticking out the top, and it's got all these notches to represent the hours of the day, right? And I started looking at the design of the Provo Temple. I'm like, holy crap, dude, that is a equatorial sundial. You got this building with these notches across it. You have this pole sticking out the top. It's a very unique design, and honestly, if you were to name the things that the Provo Temple was designed after, the equatorial sundial is about as close as it gets. But I did look up the actual, I guess, motivation or the theme of the design when they made the Provo Temple. So this guy who made it said it was inspired by a scripture in Exodus 13:21, which, by the way, Exodus is when the Israelites wandered with thirst, which describes the Lord going before the children of Israel by day as a cloud and by night as a pillar of fire. So once again, brings back that concept of to not wander with thirst, right? So the Provo Temple, we make an equatorial sundial out of it. Well, how the hell are we going to do that? So Dave mentioned the summer solstice, right? And in Provo, on the summer solstice, or the longest day of the year in Provo, is where the sun sets at 9 p.m. Now, 9 is an interesting number to me because me thinking in terms of this whole thing being about time because that's what they told us. I assumed that we have to use, the idea of a clock a little bit. And on a clock, where if you were to say where it's time to frown on a clock, 9 o'clock makes the most sense because that's where the hand reaches 90 degrees and creates an arc going from the 9 to the 3, forming a frown, right? And a smile would likewise be 3 o'clock because that's where the clock hand goes from a 3 to the 9. So where it's time to frown, in my opinion, is 9 o'clock. And 9 o'clock is when the sun sets on the solstice in Provo, which is pretty damn convenient for the purposes of this solve. So, what I figured out is we need to create, as we see the sun sets at 302 degrees west northwest on the summer solstice. So, we need to go back to the Provo Temple here. And we're going to build a sundial. We're going to build an equatorial sundial. And this sundial is going to be casting a shadow uh, the opposite direction, in other words, east southeast from 302 degrees west northwest. So, in order to do this, we need to get out a protractor. And I got the protractor application on Google Chrome here. And what we're really doing is 360 degrees minus 302 degrees, right? That's the angle of the sunset on the solstice, 302 degrees west northwest. We have to subtract that. So what we're really doing is creating a 58-degree angle going east southeast, which is what I've already pre-programmed into this protractor. So this is the angle that the sundial is going to cast a shadow. And it was my opinion that everything up until now has led us to this moment where we are going to cast this shadow on the sundial, and that is going to point to the treasure. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to bring that. Now, this is going to get funky with these lines because in order to preserve the lines I've already built on here, there's really no good way to do this. So I'm just going to get it out of the way, drag it over here. I'm going to bring it back over to the Provo Temple this way just to get it not interfere with all the other lines I've already made. So we're going to put that dot right here on the top of the Provo Temple, right on the top of our little equatorial sundial pole thing. Okay, and then we're going to bring our protractor over here. And probably the best way to do this is to actually go to this mode here so just everything is cleaner. And now I just lost everything. That's fantastic. Let's go back. Okay, here we are. All right, maybe I'm not going to do that. So basically, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move this protractor out of the way for a second, and we're going to draw the line, and then we're going to match up the line with the protractor after. There's probably a better application to do this with. I think the one I saw Dave using on his solve thing looked a lot easier to handle, but whatever. This is what I've got. So I already know the line goes right about through here, that where all those little flags are. That's going to come into play later. So draw that line through here, and then let's just match that up on our. Oh, here we go. Now it's working. Okay. Now we're going to match this up with our angle we've pre-drawn, and as we can see, there you go. There's 58 degrees. So that line is going exactly the direction of the shadow that the equatorial sun dial that is the Provo Temple would form on the summer solstice, right? And this is very similar to what they did in their solve with the 360 degrees minus 2 to make the 358 degrees. I did the same crap, just at the wrong place and in a more meaningful way to the theme of time, but whatever, that's neither here nor there. So here's our line, okay? And the next line in the poem is, "What points to heaven but is upside down?" Uh, so I felt like the Provo Temple points to heaven, but the shadow we're creating from it is upside down, right? Because the shadow goes the opposite direction of where the shadow goes upside down from the spire of the temple, so to speak. And I thought that was a hint to help you figure out that the Provo Temple is where it's time to frown. Another reason time to frown is 9 o'clock and the sunset is, yeah, you frown when the sun goes down, right? It's sad when the sun goes down and night has come. So it's just another kind of double meaning. But anyway, I'm kind of going out of order now. So then the final lines of the poem are get off the road at the airplane without wings. And the question is, okay, we've spent all our time in and around BYU campus and Provo building all these lines and everything. Now, how the hell are we going to haul our asses up to this spot? Or how is the poem telling us to do that? So that's a good question. Oh, shit, I just ruined my lines. Anyway, so, damn it. I'm going to rebuild these and then I'm going to splice the video back in just to not have this the interruption. Okay, so we're back. I just recreated those lines in the quick, easy way just to, keep everything logical and not have to have you guys watch me build the lines. So anyway, get off the road at the airplane without wings, okay? And that is, I'm actually going to show you an image that I downloaded. So here's an airplane, right? Is this going to make me open it up in Google Chrome? What the crap? Okay, whatever. Okay, so here's an airplane, right? Now take the wings off, and what are you left with? You're left with a freaking Y. Like literally, here's an airplane, remove the wings, and you have a line with two tails at the end. In other words, a Y, right? So get off the road at the airplane without wings. Now, how do we utilize that on our solve here? And so we get to the Y trailhead, and at the Y trailhead, there's a big metal Y at the gate. So you get off a road there, right? You get off the road at the parking lot and you get on the hike the Y trail. Then you hike up the Y, you get to the top of the trail here, and there is a slide canyon trail that emerges from the Y and leaves the Y hike. So you get off the road again with the airplane without wings, the Y, right? You hike up the slide canyon trail until you arrive at this location right here, which is the Y junction. And when you are on the ground there, that Y junction, pictured here, looks like a Y. Here you have you're walking along. There is a trail to the right. There's a trail to the left that is shaped like a Y. So that's the third place where you've encountered a Y on this hike. And as we can see, our line from the sundial is pointing right down here at this spot. And we get off the road then right at the Y. Okay. Now here is our minute hand right here, and it's not quite intersecting exactly where this line's going through. So the question is, what if we go back to remember two less than on top of the first? So let's go ahead and plot and just see what angle we're dealing with the minute hand here. Okay, sorry, I ran into another glitch there with the Google Maps thing. So here is our minute hand coming from the Carillon Tower through the Y and up to this area. And that is about a 103-degree angle, okay? Now, I want to go back to the remember two less than on top of the first, right? So we have our line going through the Y, that's from on top of the first, right? Let's make it two less than that. So let's go down to 101 degree. There's 101 degrees. Now we want to match that. So we got to drag our line from the Y to match about 101 degrees. Okay, so that's right here. So now we're a lot closer, right? So you have a minute hand pointing to this area. You have the sundial line pointing more or less to this area. And then one more thing that I'm going to show you. Gotta get rid of this. So on BYU campus, there is also a sundial, like an actual real sundial, okay? And I mark this with this star right here, okay? So this sundial actually only goes 6 to 6, okay? So the farthest it can point is due east. So let's go ahead and just make a line due east from that spot. And when we do that, let's so that's basically a straight line there right across the middle, right? That's going due east from the sundial, and that intersects this line in about the same spot. Now, in this exact spot right here, okay, in this very spot where all these lines are converging, right here, okay? I found something extremely strange, okay? I found this right here, okay? This was next to a geological survey marker, like a big metal marker, and on the back side of the tree, these numbers were written. They were 16, 5, 3, 9, 8, 7. Okay? These were the numbers written right here. And I found this, and as you can see from the picture, there's kind of this space down here. And I never really checked out this space, but there's a lot of dark space there that makes it look like there's maybe a hollow area down there. I never looked at this because at the time I didn't know the meaning of these numbers. I found this and I was just confused. I took a picture of it and I went home thinking that, I must have just screwed up or my solve wasn't right, which ended up being true. But then I took those numbers. So the numbers were the first number was 16, your. The next number was 5, time. The next number was 3, search. The next number was 9, open. The next number was 8, crack. And then I didn't write it down here, but the next number was 7, transcendent. So your time, search, open, crack, transcendent. And what's so funny about that is we're dealing with a hollowed out tree at the shoulder of a tree, just like the Lord of the Rings thing, with an open crack. And so I went home and put that together, and I about lost my mind thinking like there's just no way. There's no way because first of all, I'm not saying that they would have put these numbers there, but I was saying, okay, what if they found this tree with these numbers carved in it and then they formulated the poem specifically to spell that out. Now, obviously it was wrong, but how epic would that have been if that was the spot? If all these things that had led to this point led to this tree that had this numbered message on it, and then you have to go and crack the code through the poem. So, and the way I did this is this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so on. So, like, that's how I came up with the numbers that those correlate with. It's just the numbered order of the words in the poem. But that was crazy. And then the one last thing is, the thing was hiked to the tree that stands without bark. So technically, at that spot where everything just happened, that's Maple Mountain. So we literally, the Maple Mountain theme came full circle. So the lines in the poem that had double meanings was, uh, you know, the hike to the tree that stands without bark stood for really it stood for the plaque at the Carillon Tower, the Tree of Wisdom, the Y itself, and then finally Maple Mountain. And then the almost like look for the mark work too because this was that tree with the numbers inscribed in it was found at a geological survey marker, so that could be looking for the mark, and that came back full circle. And then I thought the airplane without wings things was amazing, where you got off the road at the sign at the trailhead where there's a Y. You got off the road at the Y itself, and then you got off the road at the Y junction. And so all you needed to hike from the bottom of the Y to the top was the one instruction: get off the road at the airplane without wings. So that's my solve. That's how it all came together for me. It was wrong, but it was a hell of a